The mansion held its breath that morning. Not the peace of safety, but the stillness of a mausoleum where even grief had learned to stay quiet. Then Gabriel heard it. Not a word, not yet, but a sound, raw and guttural and impossible, scraping up from a throat that had never made anything but silence. Gabriel Stone froze 3 steps from the nursery doorway. His hand, scarred across the knuckles from wars he'd won, hovered in the air. The leather portfolio he carried slipped from his grip and landed without sound on the Persian rug. He didn't breathe. His 3 sons, Aiden, Asher, and Arya, were not in their custom Italian wheelchairs. They were standing, wobbling, trembling, held upright by shaking legs and white-knuckled grips on a wooden cane, but standing. Their small bodies leaned forward, hands reaching desperately toward the woman kneeling before them. The maid, Jenna. She wore the standard uniform, gray dress with white collar, her hands still damp from cleaning. She knelt on the hardwood floor, both arms extended, her face streaked with something that looked like wonder and terror mixed together. "That's it, sweetheart," she whispered, voice cracking. "You can do it. I'm right here." Aiden's mouth moved, his face contorted with effort, every muscle straining. The sound came again, louder this time, a broken syllable that almost formed a shape. Then Asher tried. His tiny hand shook as he reached further, and from his lips came the same desperate, half-formed sound. Gabriel's heart stopped. Actually stopped. His chest tightened like someone had wrapped wire around his ribs. His throat closed. Every carefully constructed wall inside him cracked down the center. For 3 years, the world's top neurologist had told him the same thing. Your sons will never walk. They will never speak. Their condition is permanent. He had private specialists from Switzerland, London, and Tokyo. He had spent $47 million on experimental treatments, gene therapies, machinery that hummed and blinked in sterile rooms that smelled like antiseptic and defeat. He had buried his wife. He had built an empire on violence and control. He had survived things that would have destroyed weaker men. But this was destroying him. Jenna hadn't seen him yet. Her entire focus remained locked on the boys, her expression soft and fierce at once, like she was holding something sacred that might shatter if she moved wrong. "Come on, baby," she murmured. "Say it again for me. I know you can." Gabriel stepped backward. The movement felt mechanical, disconnected. His body retreated before his mind could process the command. The door to the hallway closed with a whisper of expensive hinges, but the sound, that broken, impossible sound, stayed trapped inside his skull. He walked down the corridor, his Italian leather shoes making no sound against the white marble. The walls rose 12 feet high, covered in oil paintings of ancestors who'd built their fortunes on steel and blood. A draft slipped through a window someone had left open, carrying the scent of roses from the garden no one used. For the first time in 3 years, the mansion felt alive, and it was watching him. Gabriel entered his study and sat behind the mahogany desk that had belonged to his grandfather. His fingers found the gold pen beside the leather day planner, but his hand wouldn't close around it. All he could see was the image burned into his retinas. His sons, standing, reaching, fighting to speak to a woman he had hired 3 weeks ago to scrub floors and fold laundry. He had known silence too long. When Sophia was alive, the mansion had breathed. She used to sing while arranging flowers, laugh during dinner parties, hum old Italian lullabies while walking through the gardens at dusk. She had light in her hands, warmth in her voice. After she died, giving birth to the triplets, Gabriel had cauterized the wound with control. He replaced music with schedules, laughter with protocols, love with security details and armed guards. If he controlled everything, nothing could hurt him again. Nothing could break through. But something was breaking through now, and he didn't know if it was hope or a knife sliding between his ribs. He leaned back in the chair, staring at the coffered ceiling. Maybe he'd imagined it. Maybe the boys hadn't really made those sounds. Maybe it was just random noise, muscle spasms, reflexes the doctors had mentioned in passing. But no, he had heard it twice. He had seen the intention in their eyes, the desperate reaching of their hands. Gabriel stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the grounds. Below, the garden stretched for 3 acres, manicured, perfect, and completely empty. The playground he'd commissioned before Sophia died had never been used. The swings hung motionless. The grass showed no small footprints. The toys remained sealed in climate-controlled storage. He had built a fortress, not a home. A vault, not a family. And then Jenna Whitaker arrived. The agency said she was experienced, professional, and discreet. She had worked in hospice care, private households, and had glowing references from families in Austin and Dallas. Gabriel had barely looked at her during the interview. He only cared that she could follow instructions, maintain boundaries, and stay invisible. But the triplets had noticed her. The night nurse mentioned it last week. The boys seem different when she's around, Mr. Stone, calmer. They follow her voice when she moves through the room. He'd dismissed it. Nurses always saw patterns that didn't exist, miracles and coincidences. They wanted to believe in something soft because the medical reality was so brutal. Now he wasn't sure what he believed. Gabriel pressed his palm flat against the cold glass. "What did you do to them?" he whispered to the empty room. "How?" He left the study and moved like a shadow through the hallways, past the guards stationed at the East Wing entrance, past the silent kitchen where staff prepared meals. No one tasted. He stopped outside the nursery. The door stood half open. Inside, Jenna sat cross-legged on the floor. All three boys lay beside her, their breathing deep and even, finally asleep after the effort. She was writing something in a small, leather-bound notebook, her head tilted, her lips moving silently as she hummed a tune so quiet it was almost imagined. Gabriel didn't enter. He stood in the shadows of the doorway, watching. Aria twitched in his sleep, a small sound escaping his lips. Jenna immediately set down her pen and reached out, her hand hovering over the boy's chest for a moment before gently adjusting the blanket around his shoulders. Her touch was careful, deliberate, like every movement carried weight she understood and he had forgotten. She smoothed Aiden's hair back from his forehead. She adjusted Asher's head on the pillow, and Gabriel realized with a cold, sinking certainty that he was watching something he should have been doing all along. Gabriel Stone had learned to live with ghosts. Sophia died on a Tuesday, 3 minutes after the last triplet took his first breath. The doctor said it was a hemorrhage, sudden and unstoppable, the kind of tragedy that happened despite the best equipment and the most expensive care. Gabriel had held her hand as the monitors went flat. He remembered the exact temperature of her skin as it cooled. He remembered the silence that followed, louder than any gunfire he'd ever faced. Then he replaced grief with gold. $47 million. That's what he'd spent trying to fix what the world called unfixable. Specialists flew from Zurich, Tokyo, and Boston. They brought machines that hummed and scanned, therapies with names he couldn't pronounce. Treatments so experimental they existed only in research papers. The mansion's West Wing became a private medical facility, sterile and cold, filled with people in white coats who spoke in careful, apologetic tones. "Your sons will never walk. They will never speak. We're sorry, Mr. Stone." He fired anyone who said never with too much certainty. He doubled the budgets. He funded entire research labs. But the triplets remained silent. Their small bodies unmoving in chairs that cost more than most people's cars. So Gabriel did what he knew best. He controlled everything else. The mansion ran like clockwork. Staff moved through hallways on schedules measured in minutes. Meals appeared at exact times. The boys' routines were documented, tracked, and optimized. Security cameras covered every corner, every angle. If he couldn't give his sons movement, he'd give them safety. If he couldn't hear their voices, he'd silence every threat that might hurt them. The house became a fortress built on fear and money. It worked. It kept them alive, but it didn't keep them awake. Jenna arrived 3 weeks ago on a Wednesday morning. The agency sent her file ahead. 28 years old, hospice experience, references from families in Dallas and Austin. Gabriel glanced at her photo once, dark hair, calm eyes, forgettable face, and approved the hire. The mansion needed another set of hands. She'd clean, follow orders, stay invisible. Except she didn't. Gabriel first noticed it in security footage. He was reviewing the day's recordings in his office, the way he did every night, watching for threats, checking patterns. The timestamp showed 2:47 p.m. The nursery camera. Jenna was folding laundry in the corner, humming something soft and low. Nothing unusual. Then Aiden's head turned. It was slight, Barely noticeable, but Gabriel rewound the footage 3 times to confirm. The boy's eyes tracked Jenna's movement across the room. When she hummed, Asher's fingers twitched. When she passed Arya's chair, the child's breathing changed, deepened, like he'd relaxed. Gabriel leaned closer to the screen. The boys had never responded to anyone. Not the nurses, not the therapists, not him. He pulled up footage from the next day. Same thing. The triplets followed her voice, their eyes brighter when she entered the room. On Friday's recording, Jenna knelt beside Aiden and sang something Gabriel couldn't quite hear. The boy's hand moved just an inch, reaching toward her. Gabriel's jaw tightened. Kindness was a weapon in his world. People used softness to get close, to find weaknesses, to slip past defenses. He'd seen it 100 times. Smiles that hid knives, gentle words that carried poison. Jenna's warmth could be real, or it could be the most dangerous thing that had ever entered his home. He watched her on screen, her careful hands, her patient movements, and he wondered what she wanted. If you believe children deserve real love, not just expensive care, hit subscribe. Only people who think money fixes everything won't. Gabriel didn't ask, he summoned. Jenna was in the kitchen, wiping down counters when Marcus, the head of security, appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Stone wants to see you, now." She followed him through hallways that seemed to grow colder with each step, past guards who didn't look at her, up the marble staircase to the second floor. Marcus stopped at a door made of dark wood, older than the rest of the house, and knocked twice. "Come in." The study was a room built for intimidation. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined 3 walls, filled with leather-bound volumes no one read. A massive desk sat in the center, carved from wood so dark it looked black. Behind it, Gabriel Stone sat perfectly still, his hands folded on the surface. His eyes fixed on her with the kind of focus that made grown men confess to things they didn't do. Marcus closed the door. The sound echoed like a vault ceiling. "Sit," Gabriel said. It wasn't an invitation. Jenna sat in the chair across from him, her hands folded in her lap, her spine straight. She didn't look away. "What did you do to my sons?" His voice was quiet, controlled, but underneath it ran something sharp and dangerous. Jenna had heard that tone before, in hospitals, from family members who'd watched miracles happen and couldn't accept they hadn't controlled them. "I didn't do anything to them, Mr. Stone." "Don't lie to me." Gabriel leaned forward slightly. "They move when you're near. They respond to your voice. 3 years, nothing. 3 weeks with you, and suddenly they're trying to stand. So I'll ask you again, what did you do?" Jenna met his gaze without flinching. "I made them feel safe. I gave them a reason to try." Silence filled the space between them like smoke. Gabriel's expression hardened. "That's your answer? You made them feel safe?" "Yes." $47 million, Miss Whitaker. That's what I've spent on the best medical minds in the world. Neurologists, therapists, specialists who've dedicated their entire careers to conditions like my son's. And you're telling me the solution was making them feel safe? "I'm telling you what I did." Gabriel stood. The movement was slow, deliberate, designed to remind her exactly who held power in this room. He walked around the desk and stopped 3 feet from her chair, looking down at her with eyes that had ordered men killed for less than disrespect. "Your job is to clean, to follow the schedules the medical team has established. You are not a doctor. You are not a therapist. You are a maid." He paused, letting each word land. "The boys have routines, medication times, physical therapy sessions, monitored rest periods. You will not interfere with those routines. You will not introduce unauthorized activities. You will not touch them outside of necessary care. Is that clear?" Jenna stood slowly, matching his height as best she could. "Crystal clear, Mr. Stone." "Good." Gabriel returned to his desk and sat down, already dismissing her with his attention. "You can go." She walked to the door, her hand on the handle, when his voice stopped her. "Miss Whitaker?" She turned. Gabriel's eyes hadn't left the papers in front of him. "I protect what's mine. Remember that." Jenna nodded once and left, the door closing softly behind her. Gabriel sat alone in the silence, staring at the place she'd stood. Her answer circled his mind like a threat he couldn't name. I made them feel safe. As if safety was something he hadn't built with walls and weapons and millions of dollars. As if love was something money couldn't buy. Gabriel didn't believe in things he couldn't control. So he decided to test it himself. The drawing room was the mansion's largest space, a cathedral of marble and emptiness that Sophia had once wanted to fill with dinner parties and laughter. Now it held nothing but expensive furniture no one sat on and windows that let in cold light. Gabriel had the staff bring the triplets down at exactly 3 o'clock. The nurses wheeled them in, positioned them in a semicircle near the center of the room, then left when Gabriel dismissed them with a look. He wanted no audience, no witnesses to whatever was about to happen, or not happen. He stood before his sons, studying their faces. Aiden, Asher, Aria, 3 years old. They had Sophia's eyes, her delicate features. They looked at him with the blank, distant expressions he'd grown accustomed to, present but unreachable, like reflections in water he couldn't touch. Aiden, Gabriel said, his voice firm but not unkind. Can you look at me? Nothing. The boy's gaze drifted past him, unfocused. Gabriel crouched down, bringing himself to their eye level. He softened his tone, as therapists had instructed during those first terrible months. It's Daddy. I'm right here. Can you see me? Asher blinked slowly. Aria's head tilted slightly, but not toward Gabriel. Toward the doorway. Gabriel tried again. I know you can hear me. Doctors say you understand more than you can show. If you can move, even a little, I need you to try. For me, please. The word felt foreign in his mouth. Gabriel Stone didn't beg. He commanded, negotiated, and threatened. But here, kneeling on imported marble in front of his own children, he was begging. And they gave him nothing. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Gabriel felt something crack inside his chest. The same helpless rage that had lived there since Sophia died. He'd built empires. He'd won wars. But he couldn't reach his sons. Marcus, he called toward the hallway. Get the maid. 30 seconds later, Jenna appeared in the doorway. She still wore her uniform, her hands damp like she'd been washing something. She saw the scene. Gabriel kneeling, the boys unresponsive, and something shifted in her expression. What's on, hey? Come here. Jenna walked into the room, her footsteps quiet against the floor. She didn't move quickly, didn't rush, just walked at her own pace, humming something soft under her breath, and everything changed. Aiden's head snapped toward her, his eyes dull and distant seconds ago, suddenly focused with an intensity that stole Gabriel's breath. Asher made a sound, small and urgent. Aria's hands gripped the armrests of his wheelchair, his tiny body leaning forward. Jenna knelt beside them, her movements gentle and unhurried. Hey, sweet boys, I'm here. Aiden's hand reached out, trembling, straining toward her. Asher tried to push himself forward in his chair, his legs moving in small, uncoordinated jerks. Aria made another sound, louder this time, his mouth forming shapes that almost looked like words. Gabriel stood frozen, watching his sons come alive for someone else. How? The word came out rough, broken. How are you doing this? Jenna glanced up at him, her expression patient but firm. They need a mother's patience, Mr. Stone, not a boss's orders. The words hit him like a fist to the throat. What do you think Gabriel should do? Listen to Jenna or keep trying to control everything? Drop a comment below. Gabriel's hands clenched at his sides. Every instinct screamed that she was wrong. That control was the only thing that had kept his world from collapsing completely. But his sons were reaching for her, not him, and that truth was harder than any bullet he'd ever taken. Gabriel learned to watch from shadows long before he learned to rule from thrones. The mansion had hidden vantage points built into its architecture. Alcoves behind bookcases, galleries above certain rooms, panels and walls that opened to narrow observation spaces. His grandfather had designed them for security. Gabriel used them now for something different. He stood in the gallery above the nursery, concealed behind ornate railings, watching Jenna work with his sons. She'd moved them from their wheelchairs onto a padded mat on the floor, their small bodies arranged in a row. Soft afternoon light came through the tall windows, making everything look warmer than it had any right to be. Jenna knelt beside Aiden, her hands gentle on his legs, moving them in slow, deliberate patterns. Bend, straighten, rotate, rest. And she was singing. The tune was simple, almost childish, the kind of melody you'd forget the moment it ended. But there was something in the way she sang it, something familiar that Gabriel couldn't place. Her voice was soft, untrained but steady, the kind of voice that didn't perform, just existed. Aiden watched her with complete focus. His eyes tracked every movement of her hands, every shift of her expression. When she moved to Asher, Aiden made a small sound of protest, his hand reaching weakly after her. "I'm right here, baby," Jenna murmured, returning to him. "I'm not going anywhere." She resumed the leg exercises, still singing, her fingers pressing gently into the muscles the doctor said would never strengthen. Aiden's face began to change, his brow furrowed, his mouth opened slightly, working around something invisible. Gabriel leaned forward, his hand gripping the railing. Aiden's entire body tensed, his face contorted with effort, every muscle straining towards something just out of reach. His lips moved, shaped, struggled. A sound built in his throat, rough, broken, desperate. Then it came. Not a word, not quite, but a sound that had intention behind it, a guttural utterance that carried meaning even if it lacked form. It was the shape of a word trying to be born. Gabriel's breath stopped. Jenna froze, her hand still on Aiden's leg, her eyes wide. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered. "You're trying so hard, aren't you?" Aiden tried again. The sound came louder this time, more formed, a syllable that almost cohered into something recognizable. Gabriel couldn't move, couldn't breathe. He'd spent 3 years in silence. 3 years of specialists telling him this exact thing would never happen. And now, in an ordinary afternoon in a room filled with cheap sunlight, his son was speaking, or trying to. Gabriel stepped out of the gallery and walked quickly down the hall, his footsteps sharp against the floor. He pushed open the nursery door without knocking. Jenna looked up, startled. The boys turned toward the sound, their brief moment of progress interrupted. "The song," Gabriel said, his voice tight. "What song were you singing?" Jenna blinked. I don't know, just something I hum sometimes." "That's not an answer." Gabriel moved closer, his presence filling the room. "Where did you learn it?" "I don't remember learning it, Mr. Stone. It's just, don't lie to me." Jenna stood slowly, placing herself between Gabriel and the boys. Her voice remained calm, but something in her posture shifted. "I'm not lying, some songs you just carry. You don't remember where they came from." Gabriel stared at her, his mind racing through possibilities, threats, connections he couldn't yet see. That melody meant something. He knew it, the way you know a dream you can't quite remember, but can't quite forget. "My son just tried to speak," Gabriel said quietly, "and you were singing that song. So I'll ask you one more time. Where did you learn it?" Jenna met his eyes without flinching. "Maybe the better question is where you heard it before." The words landed like a blade between his ribs. Gabriel didn't sleep that night. He sat in his office until dawn, replaying the sound Aiden had made, the melody Jenna had sung, the way she looked at him when she said maybe the better question is where you heard it before. By morning, his suspicion had calcified into certainty. She was hiding something. He found her in the East Wing at 9 o'clock, dusting the picture frames that lined the hallway. Photographs of the Stone family going back 4 generations, men in suits, women in pearls. All of them dead now, all of them watching. Gabriel approached silently. Jenna didn't notice him at first, too focused on her work, humming that same melody under her breath. She reached up to clean a frame on the higher part of the wall, and her uniform collar shifted. That's when Gabriel saw it, a silver locket, delicate, antique, hanging from a thin chain around her neck. The design was unmistakable. An oval pendant with a floral pattern etched into the surface, the kind of craftsmanship you couldn't find anymore. Gabriel's blood went cold. Sophia had worn an identical locket. He'd given it to her on their wedding day, a family heirloom from her side. She'd never taken it off, not once in 5 years of marriage. He'd buried her with it. "Where did you get that?" Jenna spun around, her hand instinctively going to her throat. "Mr. Stone, the locket." Gabriel closed the distance between them in 3 strides. Where did you get it? It's mine, it's just… Show me. Mr. Stone, please. Show me. Now. Jenna's fingers trembled as she reached behind her neck and unclasped the chain. She held the locket in her palm but didn't open it. Her eyes met his, and for the first time since she'd arrived, Gabriel saw fear there. Real fear. He took the locket from her hand. The metal was warm from her skin. His thumb found the clasp and pressed. The locket opened with a soft click. Inside, on the left, was an inscription in elegant script. For my little songbird. Love always, Mama. On the right was a photograph, old and faded, edges worn from years of handling. 2 girls, maybe 10 years apart in age. The eldest had dark hair and Sophia's smile. The younger, small and serious, stared directly at the camera. Gabriel's hands went numb. Who are you? His voice came out as a whisper. Jenna's composure finally cracked. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. My name is Jenna Whitaker, but before I took my father's last name, I was Jenna Moretti. The world tilted. Moretti, Sophia's maiden name. You're her sister. Jenna nodded, a single tear sliding down her cheek. Her younger sister. I was 17 when she married you, 20 when she died. Gabriel stared at the photograph, at the 2 girls who'd once been a family, at the locket that matched the one he'd buried 3 years ago. His mind raced through every interaction, every moment since Jenna had arrived. Why? The word came out raw. Why did you lie? Why did you come here as a maid? Because you would never have let me near them. Jenna's voice shook but held firm. You locked yourself away. You locked the boys away. I wrote letters. I called. Every message went unanswered. So I found another way in. Gabriel's grip tightened on the locket. You deceived me. In my own house. Around my sons. I did what I had to do to see my sister's children. Jenna wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. They're the only family I have left, Mr. Stone. And they needed someone who remembered what love looked like. Words cut deeper than any knife. If you can't stand people who choose control over connection like Gabriel did, tap that like button. Only heartless bosses who think family doesn't matter won't. Gabriel stood frozen in the hallway, holding a dead woman's locket, staring at the sister he never knew existed. And for the first time in 3 years, he didn't know what to do. Gabriel walked to the window and stood with his back to Jenna, the locket still clenched in his fist. Outside, the ground stretched empty and perfect, maintained by people paid to keep things beautiful and dead. You were afraid of me. It wasn't a question. Behind him, Jenna's voice came quietly. Yes. So you lied. You got a fake reference, a different last name, and you applied to work in my house as hired help. Yes, Gabriel turned to face her. You scrubbed my floors. You cleaned my toilets. You let my staff order you around. All so you could get close to 3 children who share your blood. Jenna straightened her spine, meeting his gaze. I would have done worse if that's what it took. Why? Gabriel's voice rose, the control finally cracking. Why not just tell me the truth? Why not come to the gate and say, I'm Sophia's sister, let me see my nephews? Because you would have said no. Jenna's voice broke on the last word. Everyone said you'd become dangerous after Sophia died, that you trusted no one, that you'd built walls nobody could get through. I couldn't take the chance that you'd turn me away and I'd never see them again. Gabriel wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, that he would have let the family in, but the words died in his throat because they both knew the truth. He would have seen a stranger with Sophia's last name and a convenient story. He would have had her investigated, questioned, kept at a distance while his security team verified every detail of her life. And when he decided she was safe, months would have passed, maybe years. He had become exactly what people said he was. The song, Gabriel said, his voice hollow. Sophia used to sing it. Jenna nodded, wiping her eyes. Our mother sang it to us when we were little. Sophia sang it to me when I had nightmares. When I heard about the boy's condition, I thought maybe if they heard something from their mother's childhood, something that carried her memory, they responded to you because you're family. The realization settled over Gabriel like weight. Not because you're some miracle worker, because they knew. Somehow, they knew. I used to visit Sophia when she was pregnant, Jenna said softly. I'd put my hands on her belly and talk to them. I'd sing to them. Doctors said babies can recognize voices they hear in the womb. Maybe some part of them remembered. Gabriel looked down at the locket in his hand, at the two girls who'd loved each other, at the inscription that called Jenna a songbird. Sophia had talked about her little sister occasionally, but always with sadness. Like that part of her life belonged to a different world. Gabriel had never asked, never pushed, never cared enough to learn about the family Sophia had left behind when she married into his dangerous life. The boys called you Auntie, Gabriel said. In your mind, that's what you wanted them to say. That's what I am, Jenna's voice turned fierce. I'm their aunt. I'm the only piece of Sophia they have left besides you, and I wasn't going to let your walls and your guns and your fear keep me from them. Gabriel felt something shift inside his chest, a wall crumbling that he'd spent 3 years building. He'd been so focused on protecting his sons from external threats that he'd locked out the one person who understood them, the one person who carried Sophia's blood, her memories, her love. He'd been fighting family. You should have told me, Gabriel said, but the anger had drained from his voice, leaving only exhaustion. Would you have listened? He wanted to say yes, he couldn't. Gabriel held out the locket. Jenna took it, her fingers brushing his for just a moment. She fastened it back around her neck, the pendant settling against her collarbone like it had always belonged there. What happens now? Jenna asked. Gabriel looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw Sophia's eyes staring back at him, the same determination, the same stubborn love that had made him fall for his wife in the first place. Now, he said quietly, you stop pretending to be the maid. The attack came at midnight, when the house was supposed to be impenetrable. Gabriel was in his study reviewing security reports when the first explosion shattered the east gate. The lights cut out. Emergency generators kicked in 3 seconds later, bathing everything in red. Alarms screamed through the halls. Marcus's voice crackled through Gabriel's earpiece. Sir, we have multiple hostiles. 20, maybe 30. Kozlov's crew. They breached the perimeter. Kozlov, a rival who'd been circling for months, waiting for weakness, looking for an opening. Somehow he'd found one. Gabriel yanked open his desk drawer and pulled out the Glock he kept loaded. Lock down the nursery. Get the boys to the safe room. Now. Copy that. Gunfire erupted from the ground floor. Glass shattered. Men shouted in Russian and English. Gabriel moved through the hallway, his weapon raised, his mind calculating trajectories and casualties. 3 guards appeared at his side, forming a defensive formation. They reached the main staircase as Kozlov's men poured through the front entrance. Gabriel didn't hesitate. He fired twice. Center mass, and the first man dropped. The guards opened up, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. Muzzle flashes lit up the darkness. Blood sprayed across white marble. Gabriel moved like he was back in the wars that had built his empire. Cold, efficient, lethal. He dropped 3 more men, reloaded without thinking, and advanced down the stairs. His world narrowed to targets and angles, threats and eliminations. But through the chaos, through the gunfire and the screaming, he heard something else. A different kind of screaming. Higher pitched. Terrified. His sons. Marcus, status on the nursery. Static, then, sir, we're pinned down on the 2nd floor. Can't reach them. The maid, Jenna, she's with them. Gabriel's blood went ice cold. In the nursery, 3 floors above the battle, Jenna held all 3 boys against her chest. They were hysterical, their small bodies rigid with terror. The sounds of gunfire and explosions filtered through the walls. The lights flickered red and dark, red and dark. Aiden shook violently. Asher made choking sounds. Arya clawed at Jenna's arms, his face contorted in absolute panic. Shh, babies, I'm here, Jenna whispered, her own voice breaking. I've got you. You're safe. I promise you're safe, Ikea. But they weren't safe. She could hear men shouting below, closer now, footsteps pounding upstairs. She pulled the boys tighter, her body curled around them, knowing she was the only thing between them and whatever was coming. Another explosion rocked the mansion. Closer this time. The windows rattled, and Aiden screamed. Not a cry, not a wail, a word, clear and desperate and impossible. Auntie! Jenna's breath caught. Her entire body went still. Asher struggled in her arms, his face red, his mouth working around the same shape. Ayun! Auntie! Then Arya, his voice the loudest, the most desperate. Auntie! Auntie! All three speaking for the first time in their lives, screaming the same word over and over. Not mommy, not daddy, auntie. Jenna's tears came hard and fast. She pressed her face against their hair, holding them as tight as she could. I'm here, babies. Auntie's here. I'm not going anywhere. I promise. If you believe love heals more than money and power ever could, hit that subscribe button right now. Only cold-hearted people who put control over family won't. Downstairs, Gabriel heard it through the chaos. That word, that impossible, perfect word, cutting through gunfire and violence like a knife through silk. His sons were calling for Jenna, and Gabriel realized with crushing clarity what he'd been too blind to see. They weren't calling for a maid, they were calling for family. Gabriel heard the word auntie, and everything inside him shattered. His hand faltered for half a second, his aim dropping a fraction. It was enough. A bullet grazed his shoulder, spinning him back against the wall. Pain flared hot and immediate, but he barely felt it. His sons were speaking. For the first time in their lives, his sons were speaking, and they weren't calling for him. Something primal took over. Gabriel moved through Kozlov's remaining men like a force of nature. Not a man. He didn't aim carefully anymore. He just eliminated, one after another. Cold, mechanical, absolute. The fight lasted 3 minutes, but it felt like seconds. Bodies dropped. Silence fell, the mansion filled with smoke and the copper smell of blood. Secure the perimeter, Gabriel ordered into his earpiece. His voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. Get medical here. Clean this up. He didn't wait for confirmation. He dropped his weapon and ran. Up the main staircase, through hallways littered with broken glass, past his own guards who called after him. He ignored them all. His shoulder bled through his shirt, leaving a trail behind him. He didn't care. He reached the nursery and opened the door. Jenna looked up, her face streaked with tears, her arms wrapped around all three boys. They were still crying, still shaking, their voices hoarse from screaming. Auntie, Aiden sobbed. Auntie, Auntie. I'm here, baby, Jenna whispered, rocking them. You're safe now. Gabriel stood frozen in the doorway. His sons, his beautiful, impossible sons, were speaking. They were saying a word. They were calling for someone, just not for him. The realization didn't come as anger. It came as agony. He dropped to his knees beside them, his legs giving out. His hands, still shaking from combat, reached toward his boys. Aiden, Asher, Arya. All three turned their heads toward his voice. Their eyes were red, swollen, terrified, but they looked at him, really looked at him. Daddy's here, Gabriel whispered, his voice breaking on the word. Daddy's here. I'm so sorry. Asher's small hand reached out, trembling, and touched Gabriel's face. The touch was light, hesitant, like the boy wasn't sure his father was real. Gabriel caught that little hand and pressed it against his cheek. 3 years. 3 years of silence. 3 years of walls. 3 years of replacing love with control, connection with security, family with gold. And he'd almost lost them anyway. I'm sorry, Gabriel said again, pulling all three boys toward him. Jenna didn't let go. She just shifted, making room, her arms overlapping with his. I'm so sorry, my sons. I thought I was protecting you. I thought money and walls and power could keep you safe, but you didn't need a fortress. You needed, his voice broke completely. He couldn't finish the sentence. Jenna finished it for him. They needed family. Gabriel nodded, his forehead pressed against Aiden's, his tears falling onto his sons for the first time since Sophia died. The vault he'd built around his heart, the steel and concrete and ice, finally cracked open. And what poured out wasn't weakness. It was everything he'd been too afraid to feel. Grief, love, regret, hope. Daddy, Arya whispered, the word barely formed, rough and broken, but unmistakable. Gabriel's chest heaved. He looked at Jenna through tears, and she was crying too, smiling through the pain. He said, Gabriel couldn't breathe. He said, Daddy. They know who you are, Jenna said softly. They always did. They were just waiting for you to come back to them. Gabriel pulled all of them close, his sons, Jenna, the family he'd been fighting against because he'd forgotten what family meant. His shoulder bled. His house was destroyed. His enemies had breached his walls. But his sons were speaking. And for the first time in 3 years, Gabriel Stone let himself break. Because sometimes breaking open is the only way to heal. Drop a comment if you believe children need their father's heart, not just his money and protection. 3 weeks after the attack, Gabriel found Jenna in the garden. She was sitting on the grass with the triplets, something that would have been impossible a month ago. Aiden leaned against her side, his legs stretched out in front of him, stronger now. Asher sat cross-legged, picking at dandelions. Arya lay on his back, watching clouds drift across the sky, his mouth moving as he tried to form new words. The garden was alive for the first time since Sophia died. The swings moved, the grass showed footprints. The toys were scattered everywhere, bright colors against green. Gabriel approached slowly, his footsteps crunching on the gravel path. Jenna looked up, shading her eyes from the sun. Mr. Stone. Gabriel, he corrected. We're past formalities. She smiled, uncertain. Gabriel, then. He sat on the grass beside her, ignoring the fact that his expensive suit would be ruined. The boys noticed him and immediately scrambled closer. Aiden grabbed his arm. Asher climbed into his lap. Arya reached up and Gabriel raised him effortlessly. Duh, Arya said, the words still rough but getting clearer each day. Daddy. That's right, son. Daddy's here. Gabriel looked at Jenna. She'd pulled her hair back, and the silver locket caught the light, Sophia's locket, a twin to the one buried 3 years ago. He'd spent the past weeks thinking about what to say, how to say it, but now that the moment was here, the practiced words felt wrong. So he spoke from the place he'd kept locked for too long. I don't want to pay you, Gabriel said. Jenna blinked. I'm sorry? Everyone in my life, I pay them. Security, staff, doctors, lawyers. I pay them to do jobs, and when the boss is done, they leave. That's how my world works. He paused, adjusting Arya in his arms. But you're not staff. You never were. Jenna's eyes filled with understanding. You're Sophia's sister. You're my son's aunt. You're family. Gabriel's voice steadied. And I'm asking you to stay. Not as a maid, not as hired help, as a family and as the boy's guardian, as the sister I never knew I needed, and the aunt they deserve. A tear slipped down Jenna's cheek. Gabriel, I built walls because I thought that's what strength looked like. I threw money at problems because I didn't know how to throw love. I locked everyone out because I was terrified of losing anyone else. He looked at his sons, all three watching him with Sophia's eyes. But you showed me what I forgot. Love isn't a weakness. It's the strongest thing we have. Jenna wiped her eyes, laughing through tears. Are you sure? Your world is dangerous. People like Kozlov will always exist. But now I know what I'm really fighting for. Not just survival, not just power. Gabriel reached out and took Jenna's hand. Family. That's worth every risk. Jenna squeezed his hand. Then yes, I'll stay. I'll always stay. Aiden tugged on Gabriel's sleeve. Play, he said, the word clear and perfect. Daddy, play. Gabriel laughed, a sound that felt foreign and wonderful at the same time. Okay, son, let's play. He set Arya down gently and got on his knees in the grass. Jenna helped Aiden stand, supporting him as he took wobbling steps. Asher crawled over and then grabbed Gabriel's jacket, pulling himself up. Arya reached for the ball nearby, his small voice calling, Ball, ball! They played in the afternoon sun, in the garden that had been dead for 3 years. Jenna laughed when Asher fell into Gabriel's arms. The boys squealed when Gabriel pretended to chase them. For the first time since Sophia died, the stone mansion was filled with something it had lost. Life. Not the kind you bought with millions, not the kind you built with owls and weapons, but the kind that existed in small voices learning to speak, in shaky legs learning to walk, in a family learning to be whole again. Gabriel looked at Jenna across the grass, her arms around Aiden, the locket catching light against her chest. She smiled at him, and he saw Sophia in that smile. Saw the sister who'd loved her enough to risk everything. "Thank you," Gabriel said quietly. Jenna understood. "She'd be proud of you, of all of us." Gabriel pulled his sons close, feeling their warmth, their life, their love. He'd spent years believing control was power, that money could solve everything, that isolation was safety. He'd been wrong about all of it. If you stand with families who choose love over control, who break down walls instead of building them higher, hit that subscribe button. Only people like Kozlov, who value power over people, won't. Don't be like him. The sun set over the stone mansion, casting gold across the garden. And for the first time in 3 years, Gabriel Stone felt whole. Not because he'd won a war, but because he'd finally come home.